In America's wild forests, where secrets lurk in the shadows, ordinary people have met the extraordinary. Drawn from Reddit's Our Bigfoot, these chilling tales of Sasquatch encounters, glowing eyes, deep growls, massive footprints, pull you into moments of fear and awe. Picture yourself alone in the dark, sensing a presence watching from the trees, ready to step into the unknown. Encounter one, shadows in the pines, the Verona Loop stalkers. In the heart of North Carolina's Camp Lejeune, where the Verona Loop training grounds sprawl across rugged hills and dense pine forests, a squad of Marines faced a night in July 2022 that would forever alter their perception of the wild. These were battle-hardened infantrymen, accustomed to the grueling rhythm of field operations, spending nearly half the year in the woods, their rifles loaded with blanks or no ammo at all during war games. The summer air was thick with humidity, heavy with the scent of pine needles and sweat. The squad had paused for a brief nap break, their bodies slumped against trees, aching from days of relentless drills. Carter and his buddy, Lance Corporal Ryan Mitchell, stood watch. Their monocular night observation devices, outdated relics from the early 2000s, casting the world in a grainy green glow. The nods were far from cutting edge, but they could pick out shapes in the dark, outlines of figures moving through the trees. As Carter scanned the tree line, a faint glimmer caught his eye. Two glowing points, high above the ground, hovering like lanterns in the shadows. His stomach tightened. "You see that?" he whispered to Mitchell, who nodded, his face pale in the dim light. The shape was massive, humanoid but impossibly tall, its silhouette shifting just beyond the clearing. It vanished, only to reappear moments later, closer, its presence heavy and deliberate. Then came the pebbles. Small stones rained down from the darkness, striking the ground with soft, deliberate thuds that set their nerves on edge. At first, they thought it was the OPFOR, playing mind games to rattle them. Carter and Mitchell roused their squad, their whispers sharp with urgency, preparing for an ambush. They radioed in, expecting to hear from the advisors overseeing the exercise, but the response was chilling. No advisors, no OPFOR anywhere near their position. The pebbles kept coming, now accompanied by sharp wood knocks, crisp, intentional cracks that echoed through the forest like a warning. The squad formed a defensive perimeter, their rifles useless with blanks, their hearts pounding with a mix of adrenaline and something primal, fear. In a desperate bid to assert control, they opened fire with their blanks, the sharp pops splitting the night. And then they saw them, two towering creatures, each at least 8 feet tall, standing 25, 30 meters away. Their bodies were cloaked in dark, shaggy hair, their forms broad and muscular, radiating a strength that seemed to bend the air around them. One creature let out a growl so deep, it vibrated through the Marines' chests, a sound that shook even those hardened by combat. As if to drive the point home, it reached out and snapped a semi-thin tree with a single, effortless motion, the crack reverberating like a gunshot. The second creature lingered, its eyes glinting in the nod's faint glow before both turned and melted into the pines, their departure as silent as a shadow passing over water. Imagine yourself there, standing in the dark, your rifle useless, the weight of those glowing eyes pinning you in place. The forest, once a familiar training ground, now feels alive with unseen watchers, each rustle a threat, each shadow a question. Your heart races, your breath catches. Would you hold your ground, or would the instinct to flee overwhelm you? For Carter and his squad, the dawn brought no answers, only evidence. In the soft earth, they found massive footprints, 15 inches long, with 5 distinct toes, pressed deep as if bearing an immense weight. No bear, no man could leave such tracks. Carter, once a skeptic who rolled his eyes at Bigfoot tales, felt his worldview shatter. The forest was no longer just a battlefield, it was a realm of mysteries, where something ancient and unknowable walked. They reported the incident, but their superiors dismissed it with skeptical smirks. Yet the memory of that night, the pebbles, the growl, the figures in the dark, clung to them, a haunting reminder that the woods held secrets no Marine Corps manual could explain. Voices from the wild, encounters of the unknown. The Verona Loop sighting wasn't a solitary tale. Across decades, others who trod the shadowed paths of military training grounds and remote wildernesses have shared stories that mirror Carter's, each adding a layer to the enigma of the creature known as Sasquatch. Encounter 2. The White Thing of Straight Mountain. In the late 1970s, Thomas Reed, a Marine 0331 machine gunner, carried a childhood memory from a family camping trip in Alabama. Returning from fishing near Straight Mountain, a loud crash echoed from the hillside, followed by a growl so deep it seemed to pulse through their bones. The adults, faces tight with unspoken fear, hurried the children into the car and sped away, muttering about the white thing. Years later, during mountain warfare training in Northern California, Reed heard that same guttural growl, accompanied by wood knocks in the freezing night. His squad, who had laughed at his story days earlier, froze as the sound tore through the darkness. By morning, their mocking grins were gone, replaced by pale, haunted expressions. "It's like it happened yesterday," Reed wrote, the memory as vivid as the chill of that long-ago night. Encounter 3, the Benning Ranges. A veteran whose stepfather was an airborne instructor at Fort Benning, Georgia, shared tales of creatures stalking the firing ranges. Ranger candidates reported unseen pursuers, and drivers on the road linking Benning to Columbus dodged rocks hurled from the shadows. One night, a massive figure darted behind a friend's van, striking it with a force that left a dent. In the Pacific Northwest's Sierra Ranges, instructors spoke in hushed tones of frequent encounters, an open secret among those who earned their trust. "Your story's not out of the ordinary," the veteran noted, echoing the countless vets who faced the same mystery, armed only with blanks. Encounter 4, the Humvee Watch. Another Marine stationed at Camp Lejeune described a solitary night on comm watch in a Humvee. Reddish eyes glowed in the distance, too high for a raccoon, too steady for a trick of the light. Branches shook violently, and when he flicked on the vehicle's lights, a massive figure strode away with unnerving speed. His platoon dismissed his story, but the memory of those eyes and that fleeting glimpse lingered, a chilling reminder of the unseen watchers in the woods. Encounter 5, the Pendleton Scream. In March 1993, during a simulated war game at Camp Pendleton, California, a scream tore through the night, long and anguished, vibrating through the chests of over 100 Marines. Amid live fire, tracers, and trip flares, no mountain lion or screech owl could have lingered. The instructors, some visibly shaken, ordered an immediate return to base. They'd heard it before, one Marine recalled, the memory of that angry, otherworldly sound etched into his mind. Encounter 6, Whispers from the North. In northern Manitoba, a Cree hunter and his uncle encountered a creature while moose hunting in the muskeg swamps. Mistaking it for a moose at first, they watched it rise to over 7 feet, grimacing as it dropped to all fours and bounded away with a bear-like growl. Further north, in Thompson, Manitoba, Cree elders spoke of the Hairy Man, a being cursed to roam after a desperate winter drove it to unspeakable acts. These stories, passed down through generations, carried the weight of truth for those who lived close to the land. Encounter 7, a Skeptic's Doubt. A skeptical outdoors woman, despite her doubts, shared her own brushes with the unknown, an overwhelming infrasound reaction on a mountain highway, wood knocks silencing her dog sled team, and heavy footsteps climbing a forested hillside after her own vocalization. A retired law enforcement friend recounted a face-to-face encounter as a teenager, a Sasquatch screaming at him and his companions. A local Native American spoke of his grandfather feeding bread to a Sasquatch on their reservation. "I lean skeptic," she admitted, "but there are mysteries we can't explain." Encounter 2, the Ouachita Night Terror. In the dense, tangled heart of Arkansas's Ouachita National Forest, where moonlight barely pierces the canopy of ancient pines, a hiker named Sarah Thompson ventured alone in September 2023, seeking solitude along a remote trail near Lake Ouachita. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and resin, the kind of crisp autumn night that makes every sound sharp and vivid. Sarah, an experienced backpacker, had planned a solo overnight to clear her mind. Her tent pitched in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. But as darkness fell, the forest revealed a presence that turned her quiet retreat into a heart-pounding encounter with the unknown, leaving her to question what truly roamed the wilds of Arkansas. It was around 11 p.m. when Sarah first heard it, a low, guttural moan that seemed to rise from the earth itself, echoing through the valley. At first she thought it was a bear, common in these parts. But the sound was different, almost human yet unnervingly deep, carrying a weight that made her chest tighten. She gripped her flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, but the forest was still, too still. Then came the wood knocks, sharp, deliberate cracks like someone striking a tree with a heavy branch coming from multiple directions. Her heart raced as she scanned the tree line, the beam trembling in her hand. Suddenly a rock landed just feet from her tent, followed by another, each thud amplifying her growing dread. Imagine yourself in that tent, alone, the forest closing in around you. Every rustle feels like a threat, every shadow a figure waiting to step into the light. Would you stay, frozen, or bolt into the unknown? Sarah chose to act, unzipping her tent and shining her flashlight toward the source of the rocks. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a massive figure, over 7 feet tall, its body cloaked in dark, matted hair, its eyes reflecting the light like twin embers. It stood motionless, its broad shoulders filling the space between the trees, exuding a presence that felt both ancient and alive. For a moment it stared back, its gaze piercing, before letting out a bone-chilling scream that echoed through the forest. Sarah stumbled back, her breath catching as the creature turned and vanished into the night, its heavy footsteps fading into silence. At dawn, Sarah found tracks near her camp, 16-inch prints with 5 toes pressed deep into the soft soil. She reported the encounter to the Bigfoot community, where it was met with a mix of awe and skepticism. A follow-up search with local enthusiasts found no further signs, but the broken branches and disturbed earth hinted at something massive passing through. For Sarah, the Ouachita was no longer a place of peace. It was a realm where shadows walked, and the scream of that night lingered in her dreams, a reminder that the forest held secrets beyond comprehension. Encounter 3, the Adirondack Watcher. In the wilds of New York's Adirondack Mountains, where rugged peaks and dense forests stretch endlessly, a family camping trip in August 2024 turned into a chilling brush with the unknown. The Carter family, John, his wife Emily, and their 2 teenage sons, had set up camp near Lake Placid, their site nestled among towering hemlocks. The summer night was warm, alive with the hum of crickets and the soft lapping of water, promising a weekend of fishing and stargazing. But as the stars emerged, so did something else, watching from the shadows, turning their idyllic getaway into a moment of terror that would bind them forever in its memory. It was just past midnight when John, tending the campfire, heard a rustling in the woods beyond their sight. Thinking it was a deer, he grabbed his flashlight, but the beam revealed nothing. Then his son Ethan whispered, "Dad, something's out there." The family huddled together, their eyes straining into the darkness. From the tree line came a series of wood knocks, sharp and rhythmic, followed by a low, guttural grunt. Emily clutched her sons, her heart pounding as the sounds grew closer. Suddenly, a massive figure stepped into view, illuminated by the fire's glow. It stood over 8 feet tall, its body covered in dark, shaggy hair, its arms hanging low. Its eyes, catching the firelight, gleamed with an unsettling intelligence, locking onto the family as if studying them. Imagine yourself by that fire, the warmth at your back, the cold dread creeping up your spine. The creature's gaze feels like a weight, pinning you in place. Would you scream, run, or stand frozen, hoping it turns away? The Carters stayed still, barely breathing, as the creature lingered for what felt like an eternity before retreating into the forest, its heavy steps fading into silence. The next morning, they found 17-inch footprints near the camp, along with a snapped sapling, as if something had marked its presence. John posted the encounter on Bigfoot, sparking heated discussion. A local BFRO investigator confirmed the track's authenticity, noting their similarity to other Adirondack sightings. For the Carters, the mountains were no longer a refuge but a place where the unknown watched, waiting. Encounter 4, the Bitterroot Stalker. In Montana's Bitterroot National Forest, where jagged peaks loom over dense pine valleys, a bow hunter named Jake Larson faced a chilling encounter in October 2023. The forest was ablaze with autumn colors, the air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. Jake, a seasoned hunter, had tracked elk deep into the wilderness near Darby, his bow ready, his senses honed. As dusk settled, the forest grew quiet, the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. What began as a hunt for game turned into a pursuit by something far more elusive and far more terrifying. Leaving Jake to question the safety of the woods he thought he knew. As Jake crouched near a game trail, he heard heavy footsteps crunching through the underbrush, too deliberate for an elk. He froze, his bow lowered as the sound circled his position. Then came a series of wood knocks, sharp and purposeful, echoing from the ridge above. His pulse quickened. Bears didn't knock, and no human was this deep in the backcountry. Peering through the fading light, he caught a glimpse of movement. A massive figure over 8 feet tall, its body cloaked in dark brown hair, moving swiftly between the trees. Its arms swung low, its strides covering ground with unnatural ease. For a moment it paused, its head turning as if sensing him, its eyes glinting faintly in the twilight. Imagine yourself in Jake's boots, alone in the darkening forest, the weight of that gaze pinning you to the earth. Your bow feels useless, your breath shallow. Would you stay silent, or would fear drive you to flee? Jake held his ground, his heart hammering, until the creature let out a low, rumbling growl and vanished into the pines. The next day he found 18-inch tracks near his hunting spot, too large for any known animal. Posting on Our Bigfoot, Jake's story drew comments from locals who'd heard similar tales. A BFRO follow-up found no clear prints due to dry ground, but broken branches suggested something massive had passed. For Jake, the Bitterroot was no longer a hunter's paradise. It was a place where he was the hunted. In Washington's Olympic National Forest, where mist clings to ancient cedars and the Pacific roars in the distance, a group of backpackers encountered the unexplained in June 2024. Led by college student Mia Chen, the group of 5 had hiked deep into the Quinault River Valley, their campsite nestled among towering trees. The summer evening was alive with the hum of insects and the rush of the river, a perfect backdrop for their adventure. But as night fell, the forest turned ominous, revealing a presence that would leave them trembling and forever change their view of the wild. Around 2 a.m., Mia woke to a strange sound, a series of deep, rhythmic whoops, unlike any animal she knew. The group stirred, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but the forest was silent again. Then came a heavy thud, like a boulder dropped nearby, followed by snapping branches. Mia's friend Alex whispered, "Something's out there." Peering into the night, they saw it. A massive figure, nearly 9 feet tall, standing just beyond the campfire's glow. Its body was covered in dark, wet hair, its arms dangling low, and its eyes gleamed with a piercing intensity. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, circling their camp before letting out a scream that echoed through the valley, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth. In the rolling hills of Missouri's Ozark Mountains, where dense forests hide caves and winding streams, a hunter named Caleb Winters faced a terrifying encounter in November 2023. As Caleb moved silently along a ridge, he heard a series of wood knocks, sharp and deliberate, coming from the valley below. Then he saw it, a massive figure, over 8 feet tall, emerging from a thicket. Its body was cloaked in dark, matted hair, its arms swinging low, and its eyes glinted with a predatory gleam. It stopped, staring directly at Caleb, its presence radiating a primal menace that made his blood run cold. Picture yourself deep in these forests, the air thick with the scent of pine or damp earth, your senses sharpened by the stillness of the night. A rock lands near your feet, a scream splits the darkness, or glowing eyes pierce the shadows, watching you. Your heart pounds, your breath catches. Would you stand your ground, or would fear drive you to flee? These stories, shared by hikers, hunters, and campers on Reddit's Our Bigfoot, weave a chilling tapestry of encounters from Arkansas to New York, Montana to Missouri. The Sasquatch, by whatever name it's known, lurks in the wild, leaving footprints, screams, and questions in its wake. Somewhere in these shadowed woods, the truth waits, ready to confront the next soul brave enough to venture into its domain. As the campfire dims, these Sasquatch stories linger, haunting those who face the unknown. From Arkansas's screams to Adirondack eyes, each leaves questions unanswered. Shared on Our Bigfoot, they remind us in the woods a rustle or snap might be more than the wind. The truth waits, calling the brave to seek it. Can engineers save Bigfoot? As military departments work to enhance actions protecting the environment and save endangered species of plants and animals from extinction, the Corps of Engineers may prove to be the salvation of Bigfoot. Bigfoot, also known by the Indian name Sasquatch, is purported to be an 8-foot-tall, 900-pound humanoid that roams the forests and wilderness areas of the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies. Though most federal government agencies scoff at the existence of Bigfoot, the Corps lists the creature as one of the native species for the state of Washington in its environmental atlas. So many people have been stalking Bigfoot with high-powered rifles and cameras that Skamania County, Washington, is prepared to impose a $10,000 fine and a 5-year jail term on anyone who kills Bigfoot. The question arises, what if Sasquatch, after he is discovered, is hunted to the point of extinction? This has happened to a number of species of animals, birds, and fish.
Under U.S. law, the Secretary of Interior is empowered to list as endangered a species so threatened. Normally we know a great deal about species before we list them. A spokesman for the Fish and Wildlife Service says, "Many questions must be answered," he says, such as how big is the population? Does it occur anywhere else? Is the population in danger of decline?
One of the first steps in placing an animal on the endangered species list is to recognize the fact that it exists. The only federal agency to do so to date is the Corps of Engineers. The Fish and Wildlife Service has received requests to place Sasquatch on the endangered species list. It refused, adding, "No requests have been received for the protection of the 7-foot dentist of Oklahoma or the skunk ape of the Everglades, or the infamous Mothman in West Virginia." But despite such negative, skeptical opinions, the Corps Atlas states under its Bigfoot listing, plaster casts have been made in tracks showing a length and 5 to 10 inches in breadth, reported to feed on vegetation and some meat. Sasquatch is covered with long hair except for the face and hands, and has a distinctly human-like form. Sasquatch hair samples inspected by laboratories resulted in the conclusion that no such hair exists from any human or presently known animal. FBI unveils documents from 1970s Bigfoot investigation. In a surprising revelation, the FBI has released 22 documents shedding light on a 1970s investigation into the possible existence of Bigfoot. The probe, initiated in response to a request from Oregon-based Bigfoot hunter Peter Byrne, highlights a unique moment where federal investigators engaged with the mysterious legend. The investigation began in 1976 when Byrne, director of the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition, contacted the FBI with a serious inquiry. In a letter dated August 26, 1976, he asked the agency to clarify whether it had previously examined hair potentially belonging to Bigfoot, seeking to set the record straight on the matter. Convinced by Byrne's persistence, the FBI agreed to analyze 15 unidentified hair and tissue samples submitted for scientific inquiry. The results, detailed in a December 1976 letter from Assistant FBI Director Jay Cochran, concluded that the samples belonged to an animal of the deer family, effectively closing the case by February 1977. Now 93, Byrne remains undeterred, telling CNBC he still believes in Bigfoot's reality, though his pursuit has shifted to a hobby. The release of these files, made public on June 5, 2019, has reignited interest in the legend, with amateur investigators worldwide continuing the search. While the FBI's findings debunked this particular evidence, the documents serve as a curious footnote in the ongoing saga of Bigfoot lore. Witness recounts father's experience during Mount St. Helens eruption and ties to Bigfoot lore. The story unfolds through the eyes of a witness whose father held a supervisory role with the Weyerhaeuser Logging Company. On May 18, 1980, the father was engaged in a critical meeting in Kilo, Washington, when the catastrophic eruption of Mount St. Helens erupted, forever altering the region's landscape. Date, May 18, 1980. Location, Mount St. Helens. Land managed by federal government. Nearest town, Kilo, Washington. County, Skamania. State, Washington. This gripping narrative centers on a Bigfoot-related tale interwoven with the dramatic events of the Mount St. Helens eruption. The immediate aftermath was marked by chaos, with emergency crews and logging personnel scrambling. In the days following the eruption, the area was heavily patrolled by security teams tasked with protecting valuable equipment and enforcing restricted zones around the blast site. These patrols, the witness suggests, may have inadvertently stumbled upon something extraordinary, possibly the remains of Bigfoot. The geological upheaval, including intense earthquakes and the rapid melting of the snowcap, reshaped the mountain, raising questions about how such conditions might have affected any potential Bigfoot population. The witness ponders whether the creature, if it existed, could have survived the pyroclastic flows, ash clouds, and subsequent environmental shifts. The disaster might have driven any surviving individuals into hiding or, tragically, to their demise. Cowlitz County, Washington Bigfoot Encounter Report, May 1980. During one of Ray Crow's renowned Western Bigfoot meetings, a fascinating and somewhat unsettling topic emerged among the gathered enthusiasts and researchers. The discussion turned to reports of Sasquatch corpses allegedly discovered in the wake of the catastrophic eruption of Mount St. Helens on May 18, 1980. A witness at the meeting recounted hearing about two Sasquatch bodies that the Army Corps of Engineers had reportedly removed from the volcanic devastation zone, an operation believed to have taken place approximately 2 months after the initial blast. Terry Reams, another attendee, shared a related account tied to a dredging operation along the Cowlitz River. He claimed that during this cleanup effort, 2 bodies were unearthed from the sandy riverbed. The discovery sparked immediate action, with a helicopter swiftly arriving to airlift the bodies away from the site. Joe Bielert offered additional context. He specified that the crane used in the Cowlitz River dredging operation belonged to the Manitowoc Company, a detail that could potentially lead to more concrete evidence. The saga took another turn with a separate but potentially related account from 1985. During a helicopter tour of the Mount St. Helens devastation zone, Bobby Short was accompanied by a Vietnam veteran pilot. The pilot recalled witnessing military helicopters transporting nets filled with the charred and semi-charred remains of wildlife, including elk, deer, and bear, as well as something more mysterious. He described seeing hairy, charred arms dangling from the drop nets. These remains were taken to a common pit, where they were incinerated to prevent disease and contamination of the region's rivers. Bigfoot and the Buried A-Frame. Location: Kidd Valley, Washington. Date of event: May 18, 1980, approximately 8.5 hours post-eruption. Roughly 8.5 hours after Mount St. Helens unleashed its devastating volcanic eruption, a relentless river of mud surged into Kidd Valley, located approximately 25 miles from the volcano's epicenter. This destructive flow reached staggering speeds of up to 70 miles per hour during its descent, slowing to 20 miles per hour by the time it ravaged the homes. Among the casualties was a newly constructed A-frame house, entombed under 200 tons of silt, mud, water, and ash. The buried A-frame endures as a central feature of a unique tourist attraction known as the North Fork Survivors Gift Shop. Visitors once had the opportunity to explore the A-frame's ground floor, now situated below the surface. The allure of this site extends beyond the geological marvel, enhanced by an extraordinary addition: the largest Bigfoot statue yet encountered. Standing an impressive 28 feet tall, this concrete behemoth boasts intricately detailed fur and a whimsical, folklorish grin. Families are invited to gather around its massive legs for photographs, adding a playful element to the somber history. The owners of the Survivors Gift Shop sought to commemorate this legend by erecting an original Bigfoot statue in the mid-1980s. That initial version, slightly smaller than the current structure and crafted from combustible materials, met a tragic end when vandals set it ablaze in the mid-1990s, underscoring the statue's vulnerability despite its symbolic resilience. Though the fate of the authentic Bigfoot remains a subject of speculation, the current Bigfoot statue stands as a survivor in its own right. Replaced with a more durable concrete design, it continues to draw visitors. The Enigma of Bigfoot at Mount St. Helens. On May 18, 1980, a date forever etched into the memory of the Pacific Northwest, Mount St. Helens erupted at 8:32 a.m. with the explosive power of 24 megatons of TNT, capable of flattening forests, evaporating lakes, and sculpting a mile-wide crater. The sky darkened as ash fell like a poisonous snowfall. Yet amid the devastation, a lesser-known narrative began to surface. While the world grappled with the volcano's wrath, whispers emerged of a different discovery buried in the debris. Contractors reported seeing soldiers guarding ash-covered bodies that appeared too tall to be human. Medics hinted at treating hulking, bandaged figures in dimly lit tents. Pilots spoke of helicopters lifting cargo nets filled with mysterious contents, ferried to a secluded military base. Tonight, our focus shifts beyond the lava and landslides to a provocative question. Did the U.S. military undertake a secret rescue of Bigfoot? We must journey back through time to a mountain steeped in mystery, where native tribes spoke of mountain devils. Centuries before settlers arrived, the Cowlitz people gathered around campfires, recounting tales of beings they dubbed mountain devils, towering, hairy figures roaming the slopes of Low Wit, now known as Mount St. Helens. These devils stood 9 to 10 feet tall, their coarse hair and glowing eyes cutting through the night. They moved with uncanny silence, leaving only massive footprints in the mud before vanishing at dawn. The tribes revered them as wilderness guardians, cautioning against lingering in high caves after sunset, a warning rooted in lived experience handed down through generations. In July 1924, these oral traditions collided with modernity when 5 gold prospectors set up camp in a remote gorge near Spirit Lake. Fred Beck, Marion Smith, his son Roy, Gabe Lefevre, and John Peterson sheltered in a crude log cabin. One afternoon, Beck and a companion hiked to a spring. As they filled their canteens, rustling broke the silence. Beck turned to face a 7-foot-tall creature, its blackish-brown hair unmistakable, standing 30 yards away. That night, the miners barricaded themselves inside as midnight approached. Suddenly, thud, 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 rocks battered the walls and the roof creaked under a heavy presence. In 2013, researcher Mark Mersell trekked to the site with a metal detector, uncovering .30, 30 Winchester casings matching Beck's described firearms, tangible evidence of the encounter. By the 1970s, sightings escalated. Loggers along the Lewis River documented 18-inch footprints embedded in riverbanks, while hikers reported guttural growls and a musky, rotting meat stench near Spirit Lake. The 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film, capturing a hairy female Sasquatch in a California creek, amplified the phenomenon across the Pacific Northwest, transforming Bigfoot from folklore into a cultural obsession. At 8:32 a.m. on May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. Yet, amid the ruin, something unusual emerged. Contractors near the Toutle River described soldiers guarding tarps over massive ash-coated shapes. One worker claiming a glimpse of a hairy, human-like hand protruding, far larger than a bear's. A retired Army pilot described airlifting unmarked cargo nets to Joint Base Lewis McChord, noting their unusual weight. Once a net's corner flapped open, revealing a foot too large with splayed toes like a primate's. A volunteer medic, Karen, recounted treating 3 bandaged figures over 8 feet long in a Coldwater Creek triage tent. She glimpsed a thick-fingered hand with black nails and coarse hair through gauze. A guardsman near Spirit Lake reported tall, hunched figures escorted into a temporary hangar, one blanket slipping to reveal a hairy ash-gray shoulder too broad for a human. A retired airman recalled securing a hangar at Lewis McChord for 2 non-human entities over 8 feet tall, their backward-bending knees and heavy coats marking them as otherworldly. In 2004, a FOIA request for recovery logs yielded no records responsive to your request, despite details of helicopter deployments to unmarked LZs in the blast zone. Consider survival. Bigfoot, described as nocturnal and cave-dwelling, may have sheltered in lava tubes during the blast, emerging burned and exposed as forests vanished. Why intervene? The 1973 Endangered Species Act might compel protection. Cold War fears could drive study or weaponization of a new hominid. Public panic threatened stability, justifying secrecy. Eyewitnesses had no gain, only loss. Their accounts, backed by Mersell's 2013 casings and recent Toutle River growls, defied dismissal. The mountain's legacy persists, its restricted valleys and denied requests hinting at a living mystery. As you stand in a shadowed forest, will you shrug off the chill, or recall Ape Canyon, the medics, the whispers of Lewis McChord? Is this a tale or a truth watching from the mist? As the mist settles over Mount St. Helens once more, the enigma of Bigfoot lingers, a mystery woven into the ash and legends of the past. Whether guardian of the wild or a tale lost to time, the story invites us to keep listening, keep searching. Bigfoot, blood-curdling encounters from the abyss of time. Brace yourself, listeners, for a descent into pure terror as we unravel the bone-chilling legend of Bigfoot. Long before drones scoured the skies or night vision cameras pierced the dark, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, began collecting petrifying accounts of Sasquatch, stories whispered in fear around campfires, etched into history through trembling voices. Encounter 1, the Phantom Knocks of Idaho's Bitterroot Abyss, 1955, Class B. A dark figure was gliding between the trees. A branch snapped just beyond the firelight, and Eli fired a warning shot, the blast swallowed by an unnatural silence. The knocks ceased, but the stench clung to the air, and faint, rhythmic thuds echoed through the valley until dawn. At first light, they found a massive boulder, 3 feet wide, flipped upside down near their camp, its roots torn from the earth, impossible for human hands. Local legends, later cataloged by BFRO, spoke of wild men haunting these peaks, their knocks a warning to flee. Did Eli and Nate stumble into the lair of a Bitterroot Sasquatch? The mountains guard their secrets, but the terror lingers. Encounter 2, the spectral gaze of California's Santa Lucia Nightmare, 1955, Class A. What if a colossal figure watched you from the cliffs, its glowing eyes promising a fate worse than death? In the fog-draped Santa Lucia Mountains of California, 1955, rancher Miguel Alvarez drove his cattle through a narrow valley as dusk bled into night. A coastal mist rolled in, thick and suffocating, cloaking the cliffs in ghostly white. His horses grew restless, snorting and shying away from the rocky heights above. A sudden chill gripped Miguel, unrelated to the damp air, and his skin prickled as if pierced by unseen eyes. Glancing up, he froze. Atop a jagged ridge stood a monstrous figure, 8 feet tall, its shaggy coal-black fur swaying in the wind. Its eyes, 2 glowing embers in the twilight, locked onto his, radiating a cold, predatory intelligence that turned his blood to ice. A rancid musk, like decayed earth, choked the air, and the cattle lowed in panic. Miguel's closer. A deep, rumbling growl shook the valley, and Miguel's horse reared, nearly throwing him to the rocks. He fired a shot skyward, the crack echoing off the cliffs. In an instant, the figure melted into the mist, but heavy, deliberate footsteps crunched down the slope, closer with every heartbeat. Miguel spurred his horse, galloping blindly toward his ranch, the growl trailing him like a vengeful wraith. All night he barred his doors, hearing distant early cryptozoologists recorded his tale, and BFRO's 600-plus California sightings, many coastal, mirror his dread. Was this the dark watcher of ancient lore, or a Sasquatch claiming its domain? The cliffs whisper no answers, only terror. Encounter 3, the demon howl of Montana's Flathead Void, 1940, Class B. What if a scream trapper Larry Burns camped beside a glassy creek at 5,000 feet, his breath clouding in the sub-zero air? Past midnight, a blood-curdling howl ripped through the silence, low, booming, and so powerful it seemed to shake the snow-laden pines. No wolf or cougar could unleash such a sound. Larry, a seasoned wilderness guide, gripped his rifle, his heart hammering as the howl erupted again closer, paired with a rancid stench that stung as his fire sputtered, casting wild shadows that danced like specters. Larry shouted into the dark, his voice cracking, but a guttural growl answered, vibrating through his bones. His lantern's weak beam caught fleeting glimpses, tall, upright shapes weaving between trees, their movements too swift, too silent for their size. He fired a warning shot, the blast swallowed by the forest, and the footsteps paused. But the growl deepened, now from him hilling him. Dawn revealed no tracks in the fresh snow, an impossibility. Yet a towering pine near his camp was shattered, its trunk splintered 10 feet high, far beyond a bear's reach. Trapper tales, later archived by BFRO, spoke of wild men in Montana's 500-plus sightings, their howls a prelude to terror. Was Lila hunted by a flathead Sasquatch, or something even darker? The forest's silence screams with menace. Encounter 4, the desert. In the desolate Mogollon Rim of Arizona, 1958, prospector Ruth Callahan trekked along Fossil Creek at 7,000 feet, her boots crunching through pine needles as she hunted quartz in the fading light. As dusk settled, the air grew unnaturally still, and a foul odor, like wet fur and rotting leaves, clogged her throat. A low, menacing growl echoed off the canyon walls, and her feet tall, its reddish-brown fur blending with the desert's twilight glow. Its eyes, glinting like polished obsidian, bored into hers with a hunger that stopped her heart. Ruth's pickaxe trembled in her grip as the creature stepped forward, dislodging a cascade of pebbles that clattered into the canyon. A twig snapped behind her. She spun, seeing nothing. Ruth bolted, stumbling over jagged rocks, the growl chasing her like a living shadow. She reached her camp, piling logs on her fire, but heavy thuds circled just beyond the light, relentless and mocking. At dawn, she found a single 15-inch footprint pressed deep into the sandy soil, its edges crisp, as if carved by a titan. Local storytellers and later BFRO recorded her account, noting Arizona's 200-plus sightings, many on the rim, the fear alive. If these heart-stopping Bigfoot encounters left you clutching your seat, smash that like button and subscribe to fuel more viral terror. Your support keeps these chilling tales alive, dragging the shadows of Sasquatch into the light. Share your own spooky stories in the comments. Have you felt the eyes of the unknown? Stay vigilant and alone. Encounter 1. The Phantom Knocks of Idaho's Bitterroot Abyss, 1955, Class B. A dark figure was gliding between the trees. A branch snapped just beyond the firelight, and Eli fired a warning shot, the blast swallowed by an unnatural silence. The knocks ceased, but the stench clung to the air, and faint, rhythmic thuds echoed through the valley until dawn. At first light, they found a massive boulder, 3 feet wide, flipped upside down near their camp, its roots torn from the earth, impossible for human hands. Local legends, later catalogued by BFRO, spoke of wild men haunting these peaks, their knocks a warning to flee. Did Eli and Nate stumble into the lair of a Bitterroot Sasquatch? The mountains guard their secrets, but the terror lingers. Encounter 2. The Spectral Gaze of California's Santa Lucia Nightmare, 1955, Class A. What if a colossal figure watched you from the cliffs, its glowing eyes promising a fate worse than death? In the fog-draped Santa Lucia Mountains of California, 1955, rancher Miguel Alvarez drove his cattle through a narrow valley as dusk bled into night. A coastal mist rolled in, thick and suffocating, cloaking the cliffs in ghostly white. His horses grew restless, snorting and shying away from the rocky heights above. A sudden chill gripped Miguel, unrelated to the damp air, and his skin prickled as if pierced by unseen eyes. Glancing up, he froze. Atop a jagged ridge stood a monstrous figure 8 feet tall, its shaggy, coal-black fur swaying in the wind. Its eyes, two glowing embers in the twilight, locked onto his, radiating a cold, predatory intelligence that turned his blood to ice. A rancid musk, like decayed earth, choked the air, and the cattle lowed in panic. Miguel's hands trembled as he raised his rifle, shouting into the fog, but the creature stood unmoved, its silhouette growing sharper as it stepped closer. A deep, rumbling growl shook the valley, and Miguel's horse reared, nearly throwing him to the rocks. He fired a shot skyward, the crack echoing off the cliffs. In an instant, the figure melted into the mist, but heavy, deliberate footsteps crunched down the slope, closer with every heartbeat. Miguel spurred his horse, galloping blindly toward his ranch, the growl trailing him like a vengeful wraith. All night he barred his doors, hearing distant thuds and scratches outside. At dawn he found massive 15-inch tracks etched into the muddy ridge, their depth suggesting a weight no man could match. Early cryptozoologists recorded his tale, and BFRO's 600-plus California sightings, many coastal, mirror his dread. Was this the dark watcher of ancient lore, or a Sasquatch claiming its domain? The cliffs whisper no answers, only terror. Encounter 3. The Demon Howl of Montana's Flathead Void, 1940, Class B. What if a scream in the night wasn't animal, but a colossal beast marking you as prey? In the frozen depths of Montana's Flathead National Forest, 1940, trapper Larry Burns camped beside a glassy creek at 5,000 feet, his breath clouding in the sub-zero air. Past midnight, a blood-curdling howl ripped through the silence. Low, booming, and so powerful it seemed to shake the snow-laden pines. No wolf or cougar could unleash such a sound. Larry, a seasoned wilderness guide, gripped his rifle, his heart hammering as the howl erupted again, closer, paired with a rancid stench that stung his nostrils. Heavy footsteps crunched in the snow, circling his camp, each step deliberate, as if savoring his fear. His fire sputtered, casting wild shadows that danced like specters. Larry shouted into the dark, his voice cracking, but a guttural growl answered, vibrating through his bones. His lantern's weak beam caught fleeting glimpses. Tall, upright shapes weaving between trees, their movements too swift, too silent for their size. He fired a warning shot, the blast swallowed by the forest, and the footsteps paused. But the growl deepened, now from him hilling him to the core. All night Larry sat rigid, hearing branches snap and heavy thuds drawing near, then retreating as if toying with him. Dawn revealed no tracks in the fresh snow, an impossibility. Yet a towering pine near his camp was shattered, its trunk splintered 10 feet high, far beyond a bear's reach. Trapper tales later archived by BFRO spoke of wild men in Montana's 500-plus sightings, their howls a prelude to terror. Was Lila hunted by a flathead Sasquatch or something even darker? The forest's silence screams with menace. Encounter 4. The Desert Phantom of Arizona's Mogollon Abyss, 1958, Class A. What if the desert silence hid a creature that turned your solitude into a waking nightmare? In the desolate Mogollon Rim of Arizona, 1958, prospector Ruth Callahan trekked along Fossil Creek at 7,000 feet, her boots crunching through pine needles as she hunted quartz in the fading light. As dusk settled, the air grew unnaturally still, and a foul odor, like wet fur and rotting leaves, clogged her throat. A low, menacing growl echoed off the canyon walls, and her mule, Daisy, snorted wildly, eyes rolling in panic. Ruth's gaze darted to a rocky outcrop above, where a hulking figure loomed, 8 feet tall, its reddish-brown fur blending with the desert's twilight glow. Its eyes, glinting like polished obsidian, bored into hers with a hunger that stopped her heart. Ruth's pickaxe trembled in her grip as the creature stepped forward, dislodging a cascade of pebbles that clattered into the canyon. A twig snapped behind her. She spun, seeing nothing, but the sensation of being watched from all sides tightened like a noose. The creature growled again, louder, its chest heaving as if savoring her fear. Ruth bolted, stumbling over jagged rocks, the growl chasing her like a living shadow. She reached her camp, piling logs on her fire, but heavy thuds circled just beyond the light, relentless and mocking. At dawn, she found a single 15-inch footprint pressed deep into the sandy soil, its edges crisp, as if carved by a titan. Local storytellers and later BFRO recorded her account, noting Arizona's 200-plus sightings, many on the rim of the so-called Mogollon monster. Was Ruth marked by a Sasquatch or a desert demon? The canyon's silence holds only dread. Keep the fear alive. If these heart-stopping Bigfoot encounters left you clutching your seat, smash that like button and subscribe to fuel more viral terror. Your support keeps these chilling tales alive, dragging the shadows of Sasquatch into the light. Share your own spooky stories in the comments. Have you felt the eyes of the unknown? Stay vigilant and never wander the wilds alone.
Deep in the untamed wilds of Washington, where ancient forests and misty lakes guard their secrets, Bigfoot is more than a legend. It's a presence that haunts those who venture too far. In this video, we bring you 6 gripping, dramatized true encounters from before 1980, drawn from real reports of hikers, campers, and locals who crossed paths with the unknown. From menacing tree pushovers at Cub Lake to a shadowy figure stealing cookies in the moonlight, these stories will pull you into the heart of the Pacific Northwest's darkest mysteries. So, settle in, turn down the lights, and let's explore the terrors that lurk in Washington's shadows. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales.
My name is Ethan Cole, and in July 1977, I was hiking to Cub Lake, 5 miles east of Lake Chelan, Washington, with my roommate Nate. We'd taken the Lady of the Lake ferry to the Prince Creek Boat and Campground, dropped off at a flag stop, craving a break from the summer crowds. The day was sunny, 85 degrees, no wind. The trail winding through dense forest along Middle Fork Prince Creek. We were in high spirits, joking about finding Bigfoot, though I never took the stories seriously. That changed in the lake basin. The hike was grueling but beautiful, pines towering overhead, the air thick with the scent of sap and earth. As we crested into the level basin near Cub Lake, the forest opened slightly, revealing a meadow dotted with wildflowers. That's when we heard it. A deafening thud, like a massive tree hitting the ground. The earth shook under our boots, and we froze, scanning the trees. Probably just a dead tree falling, Nate said, but his voice was shaky. We kept walking, but 2 minutes later another thud echoed, closer this time, the ground trembling again. I felt eyes on us, a prickling on my neck, but saw nothing. Over the next 10 minutes, 3 more trees fell. Each crash louder, more deliberate, spaced exactly 2 minutes apart. The air grew heavy, the birds silent, and a faint, musky stench drifted through the basin. Nate grabbed my arm, whispering, "This isn't right, something's watching us." I nodded, my heart pounding. We turned back, abandoning our plan to camp at the lake. As we retraced our steps, the thuds followed. 5 more, each one shaking the ground, like whatever was out there was herding us out. The crashes stopped only when we reached the thicker forest, the trail sloping back toward Lake Chelan. We camped by the lake that night, too rattled to sleep, our fire blazing high. In the morning, we hiked back to the basin, hoping to find proof. Near the GPS coordinates, 48.197873, -120.419201, we found freshly splintered trees, their trunks snapped like matchsticks, too high for a bear or a storm. No footprints, no fur, just that lingering stench and a feeling of being watched. The locals on the ferry back said we were lucky. They'd heard stories of something in those woods, something that doesn't like visitors. I don't know what pushed those trees down, but it wasn't natural. It wanted us gone, and I've never gone back to Cub Lake.
I'm Steve Franklin, and in August 1968 I was vice president of the Edmonds Junior Sportsman's Club, leading a group of 6 kids and 1 adult to Colchuck Lake, up the Icicle River Trail from Leavenworth, Washington. The trail was tough, 6 miles through dense forest to 5,200 feet, but my buddy Glenn and I pushed ahead to set up camp and build a fire. Our adult chaperone, Mr. Larson, had fallen into a creek 2 miles in, so we wanted to have a fire ready to dry him off. It was dark when we reached the lake, the trail fading into a talus slope. We yelled back and forth, searching for a spot, until Glenn found a lean-to near the water. We set up camp, the moon breaking through clouds, casting shadows over the pines. I went to the lake for water, my pan clinking against the rocks when I heard screams, high-pitched, piercing like a cougar but faster, circling the lake. I thought it was coming for me, so I sprinted back, grabbing my .22 rifle. Glenn and I waited, hearts racing, but no cougar appeared. We cooked eggs, assuming the rest of the group wasn't coming that night, and tried to sleep. I couldn't, too wired from the screams, lying awake by the lean-to's windbreak, a 6-foot wall of poles. Around 2:30 a.m., I saw a head moving behind the windbreak, silhouetted against the moonlight. Thinking it was Mr. Larson, I watched as it reached the end and crouched, rummaging through my backpack. "You finally made it," I said, sitting up. The figure stood and my blood ran cold. It was no man. Over 7 feet tall, broad, covered in dark, shaggy fur. The fire's glow caught its eyes, glowing like embers, and a stench like wet fur and rot hit me. I froze, my rifle useless beside me, too scared to move. It stared for seconds, then turned, crashing through the trees. I woke Glenn, but it was gone, only its footsteps fading into the night. In the morning, my pack was a mess, stuff scattered, and my Oreo cookies were gone, the package empty. The group arrived, and Mr. Larson said it was a bear, but I knew better. We found a cave-like slab on the talus slope filled with black hair and brush, like a den. Years later, I saw a magazine about Sasquatch sightings at Kolchak Lake, and those screams matched recordings I heard. Whatever it wasn't a bear. It was something that wanted my cookies, and maybe more.
I'm Dan Carter, and in February 1973, I rode my motorcycle up to visit friends camping in a trailer near Wenatchee, Washington, in the pine forests below the timberline. It was dusk, foggy with snow on the ground, the air biting cold. I'd heard the Bigfoot stories. Leavenworth, just 20 minutes away, had sightings going back years, but I didn't put much stock in them. That evening, as I cut my engine by the trailer, I saw something that changed my mind. Across an open hillside about 250 yards away, a dark figure moved through the snow. At first I thought it was a hunter, but it was too tall, easily 7 feet, maybe more, and covered in what looked like a hairy suit. Its stride was long, effortless, cutting through the snow like it weighed nothing. I watched, my breath catching as it glanced back at me, its eyes locking onto mine, small and glinting in the fading light. It didn't stop, just kept walking, looking back every few steps like it was making sure I saw it. The thing was massive, maybe 600 pounds, its shoulders broader than any man's. I stood frozen, my hands still on the handlebars as it climbed the ridge and vanished into the timber. The fog thickened, swallowing the hillside, but that gaze stayed with me, cold and deliberate. I didn't tell my friends right away. It haunted me for a year before I spoke of it. When my brother-in-law reported his own sighting in '94, I finally shared the story. The locals weren't surprised. Wenatchee's woods have always held secrets. I went back once, found no tracks in the snow, but the air felt wrong, like something was still watching. That thing wasn't human, and it knew I was there. I haven't ridden those trails since.
I'm Tommy Ellis, and in the summer of 1954, I was a kid playing in a sandbox by Miners Creek near Holden, Washington, where my dad worked for the House Sound Mining Company. It was hot, late July, the North Cascades wilderness stretching out around us, buckbrush to the north and a glacier at the valley's end. My friend Eddie and I were digging, the creek's roar drowning out everything, when I looked up and saw him, a man in a fur coat, stepping from boulder to boulder across the creek, maybe 100 yards away. It was strange, too hot for a coat, and he moved oddly, deliberate, looking down at the water's edge as he came closer. I ran to get my dad, Irvin, who grabbed 2 other miners and a pair of binoculars. We hurried back to the creek, but they wouldn't let me look through the lenses. I heard them arguing. Can't be a man. Can't be a bear. Bears don't walk like that. The figure was at a bend where the creek turned east, a scree field on the other side making it hard to cross. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, his arms swinging long and loose, like that Bigfoot film I'd see years later. They shouted, trying to get his attention, but the creek's noise swallowed their voices. Then he looked up, his face shadowed, but his eyes catching the sunlight, dark and unblinking. He turned and walked back upstream, disappearing into the pure wilderness to the southwest. The adults were shaken, muttering about what they'd seen. Eddie and I searched the bank later, but found no tracks, just that uneasy feeling of being watched. My dad's gone now, but I wish I'd asked him more. That wasn't a man in a coat. It was something else, something that belonged to those mountains, and it didn't want us there.
I'm Rachel Hayes, and in April 1979, my husband Greg and I rented the Bear Paw Cabin near Leavenworth, Washington, just 2 miles from downtown, but backed by a hilly, wooded ridge. We wanted a quiet spring getaway, the woods thick with pine and the air crisp. The first night, as we settled in around 10 p.m., we heard a single wood knock, sharp, like a bat hitting a tree. I jumped, but Greg said it was probably a deer. I didn't believe him, but we went to bed, the cabin creaking around us. The next evening, we were in the hot tub, the sky still light around 8 p.m., when Greg heard 2 more knocks, louder, from the woods behind the cabin. I brushed it off, saying it was just animals, but my stomach twisted. An hour later, Greg went to the car for his jacket and heard another knock, closer, like it was just beyond the tree line. I laughed nervously, joking about Bigfoot, but secretly hoped I was wrong. Around 10 p.m., I climbed into bed, still wide awake, when a loud thunk shook the wall behind my head. A second softer thunk hit the next bedroom's wall. My heart raced. It sounded like rocks hitting the cabin. Greg grabbed a flashlight, but we were too scared to go outside. At dawn, I searched the yard. The ground was mostly bare with embedded stones, but I found 2 rocks lying loose, one big, one smaller, right by the bedroom walls. They looked freshly placed, unweathered, like they'd been thrown that night. The woods felt alive watching us, and a faint musky smell lingered. We packed up and left early, telling the rental folks about the knocks and rocks. They shrugged, but I'd heard the stories. Leavenworth's woods were full of Bigfoot sightings. Something was out there, marking its territory, and it didn't want us staying another night.
I'm John Mitchell, and on September 1st, 1978, I was driving west on Highway 20, about 4 miles west of Sherman Pass in Ferry County, Washington, heading home from a VA appointment in Republic. It was 5:30 p.m., the day clear but windy, with a dusty haze from the 88 Thunder Mountain fire scars still lingering in the pine forest. I came around a curve, the road flanked by guardrails and a steep embankment, when I saw it. A massive, dark brown creature crossing the highway. At first I thought it was a bear, lumbering over the guardrail on the right. But then it stood upright, jerking its head to look at me, its eyes dark and piercing, maybe 75 yards away. It was tall, over 4 feet above the guardrail, so maybe 8 feet total, its body broad and covered in shaggy fur. The way it moved wasn't bear-like, too fluid, too human. Before I could blink, it leaped backward, rear feet first, off the embankment, disappearing down the slope. The speed was unnatural, like it was launched from a spring. I pulled over, my hands shaking, and sat there replaying it in my mind. 2 days later, I told a friend heading to Spokane. He stopped at the spot and found huge footprints in the dirt, leading to a spot 20 feet down the bank where something heavy had landed, crushing the underbrush. No bear moves like that or leaps like that. I'd hunted these woods my whole life, but what I saw wasn't in any guidebook. It was something else, something that knew I saw it, and it wanted to be gone. I still drive Highway 20, but I don't stop near Sherman Pass. Those woods hold something older than us, and it's watching.
My name is Ellen Tallick, and in October 1975, my family's life in Bonnie Lake, Washington, at the south end of Lake Tapps, became a nightmare. We'd lived in our house since 1965, a cozy place near Highway 410, surrounded by swampy wetlands and dense woods. That summer, construction started tearing through the forest for new homes, and the frogs that used to croak all night went silent. Kids in the neighborhood found old coal mines and caves nearby, one just 3/4 of a mile from our porch. I didn't think much of it until the disturbances began, turning our quiet life into a waking horror. It started in August, when my daughter Cindy, 21, came home from work around 11:15 p.m. She tore down the road, honking her horn, and burst through the door, pale and shaking. "Mum, there was something on the road," she cried. "It had red eyes, 7 or 8 feet off the ground." She said it vanished into the woods across from our house, a shadow passing through her headlights. I told her it was probably a deer, But she insisted it was taller than a man, its eyes like glowing coals. That night, I woke to what felt like an earthquake. A single violent jolt that stopped as quickly as it started. I thought it was a bear, but the next morning we found footprints at the north end of our property, big and human-like, too large for any person. Cindy was so scared she moved out days later. A few nights later, my young sons Tim and Joey were sleeping in a tent in the backyard when our dog Heidi started whining. Suddenly she slammed against the tent, yelping, as a massive shadow crossed over it and the house. The boys screamed, scrambling inside, saying it was bigger than any man. I checked the yard at dawn, finding more footprints, 14 inches long with clear toes near the garden. The air smelled foul, like wet fur and decay, and Heidi wouldn't leave the porch. Things got worse. One late afternoon, the dogs went wild, barking toward the woods across the street. He tried to urge the dogs into the trees, but they refused, cowering by the road. From the porch, I saw it. A reddish-blonde figure, tall and hulking, darting through the woods. It wasn't a man. It moved too fast, too fluid, like it belonged to the forest. The dog's barking became a nightly ritual, always backing against the door, as if something was stalking us. About a week before the worst night, Heidi was found dead in our driveway, bloodied across her nose and chest, beaten like she'd been hit by a car. But there were no tire marks. Down the street, a neighbor, Toby Summers, said rabbits in cages had been killed, sticks driven through their bodies. Then, on October 12th, our backdoor neighbor Jenny Dempey heard a dog barking frantically, followed by heavy footsteps running across the roof of the house she was babysitting at. Her sister Sandy and Sandy's friend Brenda saw something move in their backyard, too fast to identify. On October 13th, the air turned thick with a pungent, musky odor. Heavy footsteps thudded in the front yard, creaking the wooden porch. In the morning, we found 2 ducks dead, their bodies twisted in the grass. The next night, October 15th, my daughter Debbie, staying over, woke at 3 a.m. to 3 or 4 massive strides crossing the yard, each step shaking the ground like a horse galloping. Then came animal screams, shrill, guttural, unlike anything I'd ever heard. I called the Bonnie Lake police, and Officer Heidenreich arrived, searching the property. He found a footprint near the porch, 16 3/4 inches long, 7 inches wide, with 5 clear toes. Next to it was a piece of driftwood from our backyard garden, now inexplicably in the front yard, as if something had carried it. I cast the print the next day, October 16th, and showed it to a local researcher who photographed it. Officer Heidenreich admitted it could have been Bigfoot, though he'd thought their tracks were bigger. He mentioned this was our second call in months. Earlier that summer, we'd reported someone sneaking around, but found nothing. The researcher told me about a theory from Officer Pittenger in South Tacoma, claiming a family of 6 Bigfoot-like creatures lived near Lake Tapps, maybe driven out by the construction. Our neighbors kept reporting things, shadows, smells, dead animals. The caves nearby, the old mines, they felt like hiding places for something ancient, something angry. We stayed in that house, but the dogs never stopped barking and I never slept easy again. Whatever was out there wasn't just passing through. It was watching, testing us, and it left its mark on our yard, our animals, and our lives. The wetlands are gone now, replaced by houses, but I still hear those footsteps in my dreams and I wonder if it's still out there, waiting in the last scraps of forest.
That's it for these 6 haunting tales of Bigfoot encounters in Washington's wilderness. From falling trees to shadowy figures in the moonlight, these stories remind us that some mysteries are best left unexplored. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to support my channel so I can bring you more dramatized, true encounters from the unknown. Until next time, stay safe and keep an eye on the trees.